Everybody, Rosematter here. Welcome to part 15 of my Chaos Head Noah Let's Play. Last episode was mostly learning more about Kozue, who's been kind of like a nothing character for a while, like just little hints of her. But now we've learned more about her with her power, her connecting with Takumi. They seem to be sort of becoming friends, or at least an ally, and then meeting up with Senna again, learning about, I believe it's called gigalomania, which is the ability that they have where they can see things that nobody else can see. So now maybe they're going to be working together, and Takumi does still have to try and find his sword. And then we had an interesting moment with Rimi, where we've seen Rimi again in a room with Shogun, saying that they have to erase Takumi. So, like, what's all that about? So yeah, oh, and then there was the whole thing with Kozue, or Kozupi, as well. She said that she met a homeless man that looked suspiciously like Takumi, who said that she was special, but the most special of them all is a boy, the whose eyes are those eyes boy. So what's that about? Maybe we'll find out this episode, probably not. So anyway, let's get back into the story and we will see what happens next. Ever since she was a little girl, Kozue had possessed the peculiar ability to view the minds of others. Despite this affliction, Kozue managed to live a somewhat peaceful life by approaching her power in her own way, hiding it from others. Her change had begun with mirrors. Upon entering high school, Kozue began to see her reflection in mirrors more and more frequently throughout her daily life. At first, she believed it was only coincidence. It would only occur about twice a day. But as time went by, the frequency gradually increased. Kozupi would encounter people holding mirrors more than 10 times in a single day. None of these encounters were particularly suspect, just people passing her by on the street holding a mirror, or a classmate fixing her makeup in the bathroom. However, regardless of whether these occurrences were mere coincidence or indeed intentional, Kozue would almost always see her own reflection in the mirrors. Eventually, all of those who held the mirrors began to make noises akin to suppressed laughter. In their minds, they called out to Kozue with the words, "Who are you?" Okay, so this is like, I have, whose eyes are those eyes? It's like each person seems to have like a little phrase that begins, I don't know, the downfall of them. In the classroom, on campus, en route to school, while shopping, everywhere Kozue went, these people would appear. It was not a specific person perpetuating it. It was a different person every time. But in Kozue's eyes, anyone who possessed a mirror began to look suspicious. Anyone who would suppress their laughter around her began to look suspicious. Before long, even those without mirrors began to look suspicious. Kozue began to face hallucinations in which they would all call out to her with, "Who are you?" She became nearly neurotic, and the voices present in the back of her head refused to leave. One day, Kozue mumbled something to herself in the mirror. Upon saying those words, Kozue felt an immense sense of fear, one that told her she truly did not know the answer. A girl with the same face as hers addressed her from the other side of the mirror. Ever since that day, Kozue could no longer speak. She was unable to look at herself in the mirror. Even still, the question of "Who are you?" would continue to assault her. She did not even know whose voice it was inside her head anymore. And due to another facet of her peculiar ability, much akin to a broken fax machine, Kozue would receive the voices of other people indiscriminately, regardless of if she desired to or not. She herself had no say in the matter. And thus Kozue's mind was torn to shreds. One day in her second year of high school, Kozue was cleaning the classroom at the end of the day. As she tidied up, 3 female classmates of hers, all with mirrors in hand, were whispering something among themselves. Mirrors, suppressed laughter. Then came the question, "Who are you?" Had it truly been the inner voice of one of her 3 classmates? Or had it just been a hallucination? Oh, did she like go nuts on them or something, and that's why she had to move to another school? Because it's like, okay, maybe she got expelled, maybe she attacked the girls or something. She does have violent thoughts, like she talks about killing people. It did not matter. The reflection in the mirror found its way to Kozue's eyes, both of which were trembling in fear. For a moment, Kozue's vision blurred. Had it been intentional or coincidence? It did not matter. At that very moment, Kozue's mind, after facing endless strain for well over a year, finally broke, the event accompanied by the sound of glass shattering. Upon realizing this, Kozue shrieked, no, screamed from the deepest depths of her lungs. Out of the corner of her eye, Kozue saw her D-sword, took a hold of it for the very first time. She then proceeded to attack— oh, yep, there it is. She then proceeded to attack her 3 classmates. God damn. The hands of the 3, each of which holding a mirror, were severed by the real booted D-sword in less than an instant. How is it that this girl is able to still be walking around in public? How is it the worst thing that happened seemed to be like, okay, you can't come to school anymore, seemingly. It's like you gotta transfer. She literally chopped off girls' hands. Was it just like in her mind? Did that actually happen? Jeez Louise. According to the minimum attendance chart, I didn't have to go to school today, but despite that, I was heading there anyway for one reason, and one reason only. To see Rimi. I had no doubt the DQNs in class would make fun of me, just like they always did. That's kind of that whole thing with Kozue kind of reflected like Takumi, where it's just like he had that moment where he just broke down in class. And he almost went violent, but stopped himself, thankfully. It would definitely suck, but if it meant I could see Rimi, I could endure it. As I passed through the school gate, I thought back to yesterday. When we'd parted, Senna had made it a point to say something.
お前が望むと望まないとにかかわらず、もしこれ以上踏み込んでくるようなら、負を正にするぐらいの強い意識を持つんだな。中途半端な気持ちじゃ、妄想に食われるだけだぞ。
I didn't want to get involved in anything that sounded dangerous, so I'd opted not to ask anything else. Besides, I still didn't know how far I'd have to go to get my hands on a D-sword. I was no hero, just a useless piece of shit that couldn't even protect his own sister. But it was also possible that Shogun could show up again. He seemed to be playing with me like it was some kind of game after all. Maybe he'd felt like sending me on another quest soon. Just the thought alone terrified me. I tried to grasp my D-sword, but even that was just to protect myself from him. Without that sword, how could I ever hope to escape his evil clutches? Maybe if Rimi were by my side, like she said she would be, but she'd been absent from school lately, which worried me. What if she had been taken hostage, just like Nanami? Was there anyone out there who could help me? They would have to be someone with a D-sword. You know plenty of people who want to, like, apparently, at least with a D-sword, who, like, want to talk to you. But he's just like, nah. Ayase couldn't because she was injured. Senna definitely wouldn't. Kozue was a bit... No, she was fairly weird. My head looking squarely at the floor, I entered the classroom. Before taking my seat, I took a quick look around. I looked toward Rimi's seat first. Empty. Was she taking today off too? Was it really that simple? Was she really just taking time off? I began to feel anxious. I wanted to see her. I wanted to see that cheerful face. Next, I looked over at Kozupi's desk. She was in her seat, face down and huddled up. I was reminded of what Senna had told me yesterday. It now made sense why Kozue was always like that. Morning, Kozue. I didn't make eye contact, but I greeted her with my inner voice. The female DQNs were watching me, smirking. Cunts. Oh. It was no different than yesterday. They'd already labeled me as that otaku freak who said he was psychic and made an ass of himself on TV, and that label wasn't going away anytime soon. The male DQNs didn't seem to have arrived yet. It was pretty common for them to skip first period, and that was fine by me. I took my seat, but when I did, that voice called my name. Hey, there she is. She's just gonna show up like nothing happened? Shocked, I looked up in a panic, and there she stood, right in front of my very eyes, Rimi. With a hint of shyness, she gave me a short wave. Except we know, I mean, based on what happened, like, with Rimi saying, like, we need to erase him, so now I'm like, shit, I can't trust her. But, like, I know this, but Takumi doesn't know this.
Rimi.
It's funny, it's usually the opposite. Usually, like, he's suspicious of everyone and assumes the worst, where I'm just like, I think you're overthinking it. But in this case, he sees her as, like, his savior and is like, oh, she wants to erase you, but why? Like, what's her deal? Why is she working with Shogun? But she seems sad about having to erase Takumi. Maybe, like, he's gonna bring upon doom upon the world, and she knows this, and she has to, like, get rid of him? I don't know. It wasn't an illusion. There was a definite presence. She was breathing. Her hair was rustling. She was blinking. She was right there. She was right here. I felt a twinge in the back of my nose. A tightness squeezed within my chest. I felt like I was going to cry. I still hadn't sat down. I had just frozen with my head hanging down. I was so happy. I'd gotten to see her again.
ちょっとタク、どうしたの？もしかして泣いてるの？
I frantically shook my head. If my DQ and classmates found I was crying, they'd start making fun of me all over again. I told myself I couldn't cry, but the tears kept flowing.
わかった。私に再会できて嬉しいんだ。そうでしょ。なんてね。ちょっと自意識過剰だったかな。
Even as she joked around so cheerfully, all I could do was continue to shake my head. I couldn't even look at her. If I did, I knew I would really start bawling. Suddenly, someone clapped me on the back.
Oh, Taku.
I was like, now that Rimi's here, I have permission, I guess, to associate with you. It was Misumi-kun with an uncomfortable look on his face. His slap was a lot weaker than usual. He certainly had no issue ignoring me before. Why start paying attention to me now all of a sudden? I'm sure you'll regret talking to me. You'll become the DQN's next target, just like me. Yeah, Rimi, Misumi-kun, even you. You'd both be better off not associating with an otaku freak like me. I remained silent, but Misumi-kun forced a smile.
暗いな。朝から新規臭いぜ。ま、お前はそういうやつだって分かってるけどな。
As harsh as his words were, I didn't get the feeling he was joking or acting sarcastic. After all, it was pretty common for him to say stuff like that.
そういう大臣は朝から無駄に爽やかだね。
無駄にとか言うな。久々に学校来たと思ったらいきなりそれか？
じゃあ、嘘くさい爽やかさ。
なたく、この言い草どう思うよ。
I nodded ambiguously. The tears had somehow managed to stop. The usual routine was happening right in front of me. Both of them were completely oblivious to the fact my standing in class had taken a steep nosedive.
そういえば、岸本のことを聞いたか？まだ入院中らしいぜ。怪我は大したことなかったんだけど、精神的にかなり参ってるらしい。いいか、タク。女を落とすのに一番手っ取り早いのは、弱ってる時に優しくしてやることだ。というわけで俺、本気で岸本の見舞いに行こうかなと思ってんだよね。
大臣最低。ブーブー。今度こそ彼女さんに刺されるよ。
お見舞いに行くだけだろ。別にやましいことじゃねえよ。
ほんの数秒前と言ってることが違うし。
そういえばタクって岸本と知り合いだったよな。な、一緒に行ってくんね？
It was the typical subject matter for Misumi-kun. I thought for sure he was going to ask me about my psychic powers, but when he didn't, it caught me completely off guard. Instead of noticing, Misumi-kun went right back to what he was saying. And then we fell into our usual routine. Misumi-kun talking and talking, Rimi occasionally butting in with a sharp jab, and me just giving vague responses. And the fact it was no different than usual made me happy. Okay, this is the guy that's working with the Nozomi Group. At the top floor of Nozomi Group HQ, within the presidential office, Norose Genshi stood near a window lighting a cigarette ablaze. I definitely pronounced his name wrong, I apologize. Nozomi Group, an enormous corporate group with abundant subsidiaries, one that conducted business while being accompanied by licensed approval from the nation itself. A number of those subsidiaries then found success in a variety of business fields, from sales of clothing or groceries to managing sales and imports as a trading company. Norose, maybe it's Norose, who reigned above all as the apex of the group, looked below at the grand view of his castle. His conscious mind, however, was not gazing upon the scenery before him. Repeatedly tapping his foot against the floor in agitation, his lips curled into a sneer.
まったく。老人たちの相手は面倒ですよ。そう思いませんか。彼らは臆病すぎる。だからこそ、ここまでのし上がってきた、とも言えるのでしょうが。利用するにも、こうあれこれと横槍を入れられては、いい加減うんざりしてきますよ。現実は悲しいかな。300人委員会の影響力というものを侮ることはできません。ただ、いずれ近いうちに、そのシステムも崩壊する。世界の支配構造は組み替えられる。楽しみですか？私もですよ。ここまで随分時間がかかってしまいました。プロジェクトノア。立ち上げからすでに5年余り。
Narose approached his personal desk. The solid desk of natural oak contained few ornaments of any note, adorned only with items one might find in a typical office setting. At the table's edge, however, a single conspicuous object casually lay. Narose grasped the green, strangely designed character in his hand. Upon giving it a single disinterested glance, he promptly discarded it in the waste bin.
さて。
His narrowed eyes turned to the dim room's interior. The rear of the room, where the moonlight could not reach, housed the slightest hint of another person. Is that Shogun?
まさか、君がギガロマニアックスだとは思いもよりませんでした。どうやら、神すらも私の味方をしてくれているようだ。君のサンプルを取らせてもらいますよ。何？怯える必要はありません。私は元医師でしてね。インフォームドコンセントはきちんとしなければ気が済まないたちなのです。そもそもノア2のハードウェアはすでに完成しています。あと必要なのはソフトウェアの方でしてね。そのために君たちギガロマニアックスのサンプルが多く必要なのです。正確に言うならば NA シナプスに関するコードサンプル。脳の働きに指令を出す役割を果たしている部位の行動サンプルですよ。コードサンプルには個人差があります。持っている能力が高いギガロマニアックスは NA シナプスもより活性化し、脳のより広い範囲にわたって効果を及ぼします。
Man, here comes the exposition. Okay. Synapse, sites formed between neurons and other cells that receive and transmit neurotransmitters. Their shape resembles that of hands holding one another, but there is a gap of about 20 nanometers between each synapse. Neurotransmitters move between these gaps, and when doing so appear almost as if they are floating.
人間の脳は全体の10分の1しか使われていません。しかし、ギガロマニアックスは違う。
I thought that whole thing about like the brain, you only use 10% of your brain, I think that's just a myth. I don't think that's true.
残りの10分の9の部位も使っていることが分かっています。ギガロマニアックスの頭の中というのは実に興味深い。そのサンプルがノア2にとっていわば CPU の役割を果たすわけです。サンプルが多ければ多いほどノア2の能力は本物のギガロマニアックスに近づき、やがて超えるでしょう。納得してもらえましたか？結構。
Narose nodded in satisfaction, exhaling a cloud of smoke as he returned his view to the scenery beyond the window. Upon viewing it up close, the Shibuya nightscape was the essence of vulgarity itself, leaving Narose solely with feelings of discomfort. His persistent belief of this remote location, however, was that it was more than adequate. Nevertheless, it would not be long before this nightscape would be a sight never to be seen again. The final experiment of his Project Noah would make sure of that.
世界が生まれ変わる日も近い。
Oh, it's a Giro Froggy. Okay. Interesting. Oh. Nanami? Oh shit. Wait, I'm just trying to think of like who else has a... Is that implying that Nanami might? I'm like, who else would have a Giro Froggy? Like the only people I know of that have one that I know of is there's also oh, what's her face? Yua. Yua hasn't been seen in a while. Maybe Yua is also what do they call him? A gigalomaniac? It was lunch break. I usually skipped lunch. I had no one to eat with, and I didn't want to eat alone in the classroom. Recently, Rimi had started asking me to eat with her, but since I was me, I would always get embarrassed and refuse in the end. That meant my usual routine would be to leave the classroom and take refuge in a place I felt comfortable. Sometimes it was the library, sometimes it was the courtyard. But now that everyone in the school knew my face, there was no place I could go where I could relax. The merciless gazes that pierced through me, the abuse and ridicule that was hurled at me. Today, too, I walked around the school being exposed to all of it. Eventually, I knew I had no choice but to duck into a private bathroom. But right when I was about to... Nanami! I saw Nanami walking down the corridor leading to the first-year building. It looked like she was walking alone toward the classrooms. Speaking of Nanami, I hadn't spoken to her since the incident. I'd been avoiding her for the entire week. And I'd been doing it because I didn't know how to act once I saw her. I'd put my own life before hers. I was the worst big brother ever. It was only a miracle that Nanami had been released safe and sound. I had nothing to do with it. I'm still confused about what happened with the whole thing with the supposed, like, the coma I was in, where apparently Nanami visited me, and I was apparently in a coma through most of the events that have happened. Maybe Shogun had told her it was my fault she'd got kidnapped. If he had, she'd definitely be angry with me. Maybe she hated me. Maybe she didn't want to speak to me ever again. That was why I didn't have the courage to go talk to her. But now that I had seen her, I was starting to worry about her once again, even after everything. I wondered if I'd truly wronged her. I wondered if she had been injured. I wondered if she had been hurt mentally. For a moment, the memory of the hand resurfaced in my head, but I shook my head violently to ward it off. That severed hand, along with the bangle it had been wearing, the cell phone it had been holding. It had all been a delusion. A real delusion. Because the hand had disappeared from the refrigerator. Rather than thinking it had somehow sprouted legs and walked away, it was far more reasonable to believe it had never been there in the first place. The fact Nanami was alive and well was proof of that. Before I knew it, I had broken into a run. I was chasing after Nanami. Her figure got bigger and bigger as I approached her. She hadn't noticed me yet. As she walked, she played with her hair with the fingertips of her right hand. As I ran, I started to call out to her. I'm waiting for something to happen here, like she's not there. On her right hand. The hand that was playing with her hair, the sleeve of her uniform, ever so slightly slipped down. Suddenly I was hit with a strange feeling. I choked back the sound I was about to make. No bangle. I stopped dead in my tracks. I had seen it. It had been an extremely trivial, truly Oh! No, she's got... There's a bandage there. At first I thought it was the lack of the bangle, but like, no, she's got a bandage. It had been an extremely trivial, truly inconsequential feeling, and yet... White. It was white. As if trying to conceal something. A white bandage was wrapped around her right wrist. What is... every time it throws something at me. Okay, so we finished chapter 7. Okay. Initiated by Momose, a meeting was slated to be held at Frisia Credit Bureau, a meeting to which Bond was now running nearly half an hour late. Momose's angry voice hurtled into him as he entered the office. In response to this, Bond gave a minor shrug, then proceeded to walk up to the desk of Frisia's president with an amiable smile on his face. He's like, here's some snacks. Shut up. He had not brought any refreshments today, something he was beginning to believe may have been a lapse in judgment.
今日は別行動。
若い子をこき使ってバンちゃんは楽してるわけね。
いやいや、俺もちゃんとやってるよ。昨日だって徹夜でいろいろ調べてたんだぜ。おかげで最近の女子高生の生態についてはかなり詳しくなった。
あんたね、呆れて物も言えないわ。
で、こうして俺を呼びつけたってことは、あの子と連絡取れたってこと？
今来てるわ。
さすがももちゃん。
Oh, which kid?
かわいい子かい
Momose promptly smacked Bon over the head, stopping his opportunistic grin in its tracks. The sheer speed with which she turned her wrist made the slap especially fierce.
いつまでもバカなこと言ってんじゃないわよ、エロ親父。
冗談だって。
Before arriving at the building, Bon had made a private request to Momose. It entailed setting up a meeting between him and a certain person connected to the NewGen cases. Rather than anything work-related, it was merely to satiate a personal curiosity. He was not planning on talking about anything related to the NewGen investigations for the time being. And due to his position, Bon could not simply meet with the person on his own, else he would risk drawing the ire of the detectives he was getting ahead of. So it's a girl, it could be a bunch of people. It could be Ayase, it could be Yua, could be Senna, could be, like, it feels like everyone we know are girls. Could be Rimi. Momose urged Bon over to a corner of the office. It was a fairly cramped space, all of which was already taken up by shelves packed full of files. The location was used as a reception area of sorts, and a pair of love seats had been wedged into the only place that they could fit. Bon entered the section after Momose, and his eyes landed upon a lone girl sitting in one of the love seats. The girl was wearing a Sume Academy uniform. Her head and shoulders were curved toward the ground, and she looked incredibly haggard.
ごめんね。お待たせしちゃって。
Ah, Yua. I was like, we haven't seen you in a while. The girl looked up in startlement upon hearing Momose. In the process, her glasses had slipped down her nose a bit, leading her to swiftly readjust them with her finger.
あ、いえ、平気です。
When she saw Bon, her expression turned slightly fearful before bowing her head in greeting a moment later. Bon felt somewhat hurt by this. He'd made every attempt to look as non-threatening as possible in both bearing and appearance. But the girl's reaction made him realize that, despite his best effort, the ferocity and intimidation particular to detectives was seeping out all the same. It looks like I've still got a lot more practicing to do, he thought, with bitter amusement as he sat across from Yua.
楠木優愛さんだね。
はい。
亡くなった美和さんの双子の姉。それで間違いないかな。
Yua slightly adjusted her posture, then returned a nod. The first NewGen incident, the group dive. Aha. I knew I'd got that right. Like, I knew as soon as she mentioned something about a sister, and there was, like, in the new dive, I was like, there's a girl in there that looks kind of like Yua. I knew it. Among the 5 high schoolers that had leapt to their deaths was a girl named Kusunoki Miya.
まあ、そんな緊張しなさんな。君を取り調べようなんて思っちゃねえんだ。雑談程度に思ってよ。本題に入る前に、ちょっと聞いていいかい？ゆあちゃんは妹さんが亡くなったことについてどう思う？
ちょっとバンちゃん。
I was like, yeah, that sounds like just a nice little chat.
あ、悪いね。職業病ってやつか。気を使うような言い方できなくってな。ただ、気になってたんだ。捜査本部でも話題になってたんだが、楠木美也さんの遺族は奇妙だって。
Oh.
ばんちゃん
I was like, Yua definitely has... She has a D-sword. I wouldn't be surprised.
いえ、いいんです。
Before Momose could rise to her feet over Bon's insensitive comment, Yua stopped her.
私もおかしいって思いますから。
はあ、
集団ライブで飛び降りた5人には自殺する理由なんてなかった。家族や友人はみんなそう主張している。だが、ミヤさんの家族だけは違った。
Bon took his fan out from his belt and began cooling himself.
何も主張しなかった。あっさり受け入れたって聞いてる。あまりに何も言わなさすぎて奇妙だったってな。なんでだい？
お父さんもお母さんもミヤちゃんが死んでからおかしくなっちゃったんです。
Anguish seeped from Yua's voice.
最初はミヤちゃんの事件の知らせを受けた日はそれでも泣いていたんです。お父さんもお母さんもとても辛そうでした。でも次の日の朝、なぜか二人は楽しそうに笑っていたんです。ミヤちゃんが死ぬ前と全く同じに戻ってたんです。たった一日で。私わけがわからなくて、二人はミヤちゃんのこと忘れようとしてるんじゃないかって思って。そうしたらお父さんが笑いながら、お前に妹なんていないよって。ミヤちゃんが残した洋服とか靴とかを見せても全然取り合ってくれないんです。それはお前のために予備で買ってあったものだって。そうやってお父さんたちはニュースからも警察の
Interesting.
話からも目を
So they're
背
the
け
only
て、
family of the people that died that were acting like that.
記憶からミヤちゃんのことを消し去ろうとしてるんです。
つまり双子じゃなかったことに。
それで警察にもうちは一人っ子だって言って追い返してたわけか。
私とミヤちゃんは一卵性で、見た目は瓜二つなんですけど、あの子は、妹は親から嫌われていました。あの子はいつも自分の気持ちを押し殺して、私のことを一番に考えてくれていたんです。
As Yua spoke, memories from when Mia had still been alive resurfaced in her mind. First came a memory from when the two had still been in elementary school. One day, some relatives had brought the girls a single large teddy bear as a present. In contrast to the raw joy Yua displayed, Mia insisted she did not like stuffed animals, and proceeded to not even so much as look the plush's way. Both her relatives and parents were upset with Mia for not acting as a child should. But despite Mia's protesting, Yua whispered to her the two of them could share it, that it could be something they both treasured. However, in response to her sister's kindness, Mia simply said she did not want it, and that Yua could have it. That's the teddy bear she hugs, right? Like when she was in her room. About a month later, when Yua had grown tired of the teddy bear, she woke up in the night and happened to witness a certain scene. Aww. With an incredibly joyful look on her face, Mia was hugging and talking to the bear plushie. That was the first time Yua had ever seen her sister so happy. And from this, she realized her sister's insistence about disliking stuffed animals had been a lie. Mia had been keeping her own feelings hidden, all for the sake of her older sister. The next day, Yua found a lovely drawing of a bear beneath Mia's pillow. Until her sister had grown tired of the teddy bear, Mia had been hugging and sleeping with the drawing in lieu of it. Things very similar to this happened again and again, all over the 18 years they spent together. For their birthday celebrations, Yua always blew out the candles on the cake. But when Mia was prompted to do so, she would say, "I refuse to do something so ridiculous," angering her parents. Yua advanced to the private high school Sume Academy. Mia, meanwhile, had been misbehaving at school, deliberately scoring low on exams, and therefore moved on to a public high school. Due to the exorbitant fees, their parents would only have been able to afford to send one of them to a private school. No matter how hard Yua tried to let her sister have something, Mia would always gain the upper hand and force Yua to be prioritized. To achieve this end, she even intentionally took a dislikable attitude.
私は結局ミヤちゃんの優しさに甘えて、今まで自分だけいい思いをしてきました。ミヤちゃんがいなくなって初めて、もっとあの子のために何かできることがあったはずだって、すごく後悔して、私が代わりに死んであげればよかった。しかも挙句に親に存在そのものを忘れられてしまうなんて、こんなのあんまりです。あんまりにも悲しいです。
Yua, having now reached her limit, could no longer squeeze out any more words. She took off her glasses, pressed her fingers against the corners of her eyes, and broke down in tears. Momose sat down beside her and gently rubbed her back.
それでユアちゃんは一人で事件のことを調べていたらしいの。ミアちゃんに一体何があったのか知るためにね。
そりゃ大変だったろ
そして一人の人物を突き止めた。
あ
As Momose held Yua's shoulders, she turned her eyes toward Bon.
西条匠くんよ。
なるほどね。
Stroking the stubble on his chin, Bon leaned forward from the sofa.
いつだったか西条と追跡劇をしてたっていう女子高生の話を所轄のデカから聞いたんだが、もしかしてユアちゃんだったりする？
Yua nodded apologetically.
興味あるな。詳しく聞かせてもおーと思ったけどちょっとごめんよ。
With a strained smile, Bon lightly bowed his head to Yua and Momose. His words had been interrupted by the cell phone in his suit pocket. He swiftly took out the phone and checked the screen. Sua's name was displayed across it.
もしもし、どうした？
先輩、7番目っす。
The seventh is here. Oh, seventh death?
なんだと？
Sua's voice sounded strained. The sounds of investigators frantically scurrying about could be heard through the phone. Sua must have been at the investigation headquarters.
ニュージェネ第7の事件が起きたんすよ。
Bond's eyes opened wide, and his expression turned bitter as his teeth sank into his lip. Sensing the seriousness of the situation from his behavior, Momose and Yua watched the detective with unease.
外車は3人。
Oh, 3 victims. Damn.
3人とも胴体から体が切断されてて、それぞれの上半身と下半身を別々に入れ替えてテグス、釣りとっすね。それで縫い付けられてたっす。それと額にそれぞれ Q、D、N って読める傷が。
Oh, like DQN? Oh shit. As bad as it is, I'm always like, what's the internet? What is the media gonna call the next murder? They always come up with like these really insensitive but creative names.
何かのメッセージか？
さあ、そこまでは。それと気になることが。司法解剖の結果分かったんすけど、外車の胴体の切断部はノコギリとか包丁とかそういう刃物で切断されたものじゃないって。
どういう意味だ？
なんか強い力で引きちぎられたそうっす。
引きちぎられた。
Bond repeated Sua's words back to him with a low groan, then roughly scratched his head with the handle of his fan.
まるで怪獣だな。あるいは最近流行りの魔法使いとかな。
先輩、それマジで言ってんすか？映画オタクの自分でもさすがにその意見には同意しかねるっす。
単なる例えだ、バカな。いいから、さっさと捜査に戻れ。
After barking the order to Sua, Bond ended the call. Now that it was November, I had a feeling the sun was already setting much earlier than before. By the time Rimi and I started heading home together after school, a faint orange was already staining the sky.
ごめんね。
Despite being silent up until now, Rimi abruptly apologized.
たく、いろいろ大変だったんでしょ。
It was the first time I had gone home with Rimi in a while. I was genuinely really happy that she had come back. She had even been the one to initiate it, saying, "Let's walk home together." Since we'd only gone home together no more than twice, I'd secretly been worried it would never happen again. However, that turned out not to be the case.
一緒にいてあげられなくてごめん。知り合いが例の地震で怪我しちゃってずっと面倒見てたから。
Even though I hadn't asked, Rimi was kind enough to explain herself to me.
うん。
Though, to be frank, almost all of Rimi's words were going in one ear and out the other. The bandage I'd seen on Nanami's wrist at lunch break. It had been burned into my eyes and refused to go away.
もしかして怒ってる？
In the end, I had failed to say anything to Nanami. I'd been too scared. Even though Nanami was my little sister, even though I was Nanami's older brother, something had just felt unbelievably strange, and I had no idea what it was. The nurse had said Nanami had no injuries. The hand that Shogun had delivered to my base had disappeared from the fridge without a trace. It all had to have been a delusion. But if that was true, why had Nanami's right wrist been wrapped in a bandage? Though it was possible I was just overthinking it, and that she had just gotten burned or stung by something, or got some other stupid minor injury that didn't matter at all. Yeah, that was probably it. It was the most logical answer. But even now, I was still too scared to check. Even after failing to save her, I was still just pacing around doing nothing, not even trying to talk to her. My very own sister. I really was the worst brother ever.
ねえ、タク。おーい。もしもーし。怒ってるならそう言ってよ。無視されるのって結構傷ついちゃうな。
え
I looked over at Rimi, who seemed weirdly disheartened.
あ、え、
もしかして、私の話聞いてなかった？
After hesitating for a second, I nodded, and the moment I did, Rimi jabbed my cheek with her forefinger.
石てっきり無視されたかと思ったよ。紛らわしいことしない。
Ow, you just jabbed your nail into my cheek.
あ、大丈夫？
Rimi finally stopped poking me, and out came those words I heard so often from her. Words of worry and concern. Words that I'd heard from Rimi again and again.
お昼ぐらいから顔色良くないよ。元気もないみたいだし。もしかして誰かにひどいこと言われた？だったら私に教えて。怒ってきてあげるから。
She was acting like an older sister, or a guardian even. Rimi was just a hopeless meddler. Well, that had been obvious from the moment she'd given an otaku freak like me the time of day. I was grateful to her for being worried about me. Before now, I'd either bottled up my worries deep inside or posted them anonymously on @channel. Should I tell her about what had happened with Nanami? But when I told her about the D-sword that one time, she hadn't believed me at all. Then again, it would be the natural response from anyone sane. So if I were to tell her about Nanami, she'd probably either A, be speechless, or B, just laugh in my face. And if that were true, there really was no point in telling her. All I needed was for her to stay by my side. It would be better to bring the topic up with Kozue or Senna instead.
相変わらず汚いね。
Mere moments after stepping foot into my base, Rimi muttered that in exasperation. And yet, paradoxically, she seemed to be smiling happily as well. Weird.
変わってないな。この部屋の汚さがまさにタクって感じ。
If you're gonna be like that, then just clean it. Be my guest. With a sigh, I turned on my PC.
ちょっと。帰ってくるなりパソコン？友達が来てるんだから少しはおもてなししてあげようっていう気持ちにはならないのかな。ねえ、お話ししようよ。
Oh, okay. Alright, let's go positive. I mean, the whole thing about Senna, she said something about, like, turning the negatives into positives, right? So we'll stick with positive. After hitting you with such an unreasonable demand, Rimi sat down on the sofa. Oh yes, that's so unreasonable. He's like, hey, we haven't seen each other in, like, weeks. Let's talk for a bit, especially when, you know, it seems like there's something wrong with you. Yep, super unreasonable. If I tried to have a one-on-one conversation with a 3D girl, it would be over in seconds. As much as I'd gotten used to talking with Rimi, since I'd had a lot more chances to do so recently, I still doubted I'd even last 5 minutes. Moreover, my head was already fully occupied with the stuff about Nanami, so I very much didn't feel up for a casual conversation. And so I resorted to just ignoring her. Wow. What a great host you are. I sat down in my chair, all while remaining painfully aware of my own worthlessness. I sensed Rimi moving behind me. The rustling of her clothes was growing
だ
closer.
から無視しないでよ。
Before I had the chance to turn around, I was embraced from behind. A gentle floral scent hit me. My back was struck by the soft sensation of Rimi's breasts.
寂しいよ。そういうことされると。
I must have been running away from reality again, giving myself a delusion that was a lot easier to swallow than the real world. Upon thinking that, the sheer emptiness I felt overpowered any lust I may have had, and I was no longer able to enjoy the delusion anymore. Rather than taking her and pinning her down on the bed, I decided to throw out all the things I could have only voiced in a delusion such as this.
僕だって寂しかった。辛かったんだ。
Oh, look at that.
リミがこの1週間
His
全然連絡くれなくて。
delusions are becoming more wholesome. My boy is, he's got some character growth happening here. I could feel the movements of Rimi's body directly against my back. Her chest faintly rose and fell with every breath. As obvious as the fact may have been, it reminded me that Rimi truly was alive.
ごめん。一緒にいてあげられなくて。ごめん。
Rimi tightened her embrace around me.
私の中でも、まだ迷いがあって。どうしたらいいか、わからなくて。ちょっと考えてみようと思って。
Is that thing about, like, not knowing what to do, that whole thing about, like, we need to erase him? Was the person that she went to go visit Shogun when she's like, a friend of mine got hurt? Could have been a lie.
Huh?
Doubts? Like what? What could she have been talking about?
そもそも私、タクと一緒にいていいのかな、とか、このままの関係を続けるべきなのかな、とか。でもね、このままじゃ、きっとダメなんだ。それじゃあ、何も救えない。ねえ、タク。私が最初に願ったのはさ、一つだけだった。なのにどうして、人は、私は、際限なく望み続けちゃうんだろうね。あの空を見つけたときに、私は。
I had no idea what Rimi was talking about, nor did I know how to respond to it. Silence enveloped us. I could hear Rimi's gentle breaths close to my ear. But no matter how long I waited for her to end it with some silly punchline, none ever came in the wafting silence. Was it possible that this wasn't a delusion? The moment I considered that, a wave of anxiety ran through me. In reality, Rimi was hugging me. She was pressing tightly against me. That realization alone nearly destroyed any sense of reason I had. I had a feeling that in a situation like this, if I pinned Rimi to the bed, she'd let me have my way with her. With a gulp, I...
メールだよー、ボケナス。今の何？
Rimi let go of me in surprise, and the tender sensation vanished along with her. I'm so curious if I picked the negative one, what would have happened if it would have, how different it would have been. A complicated mix of relief and disappointment spread through my chest. Wait a second, Rimi just heard my serotonin notification tone. Oh god, how embarrassing. When I opened my email software, I saw 3 messages from Grim telling me to join the chat room. Oh yeah, it's gonna be like, dude, NewGen murder just dropped. Now that I thought about it, I hadn't really chatted much with Grim recently. We used to talk online pretty much every day. But since I'd been refraining from playing ESO, it'd been around 10 days since we last talked. Yo, hey, Ninehard-kun, I've been waiting for you, because there been another nude gen. Oh my god, that's a tip. Hold on. Oh, ASC art. A picture drawn on an online forum using only the characters and symbols included in the ASC2 character set, also known as text-based art. Okay. New gen, dude. What the fuck do you think I'm on about? How exactly did we go from new gen to nude gen? New generation, new gen, new gen, new gen? Come on, that shit's obvious. Use common sense, for fuck's sakes. More importantly, there's a 7th case.
どうしたの？
Likely having noticed my gasp, Rimi stood up and walked over to me. She peeked over my shoulder at the monitor.
第7の事件。
And it happened again. Another new gen. How long was this damn thing gonna go on for? Was I next? Would I be the victim of the 8th case? The 9th?
タク、気にすることないよ。何も怖いことなんてない。タクは狙われたりなんかしない。全部タクの被害妄想。ね。
That was completely baseless encouragement. You can't calm me down with such weak sauce shit, Rimi. Anxiety aside, Grim was pretty much the NewGen news guy at this point. He'd been keeping me in the loop about basically everything. Even now, he was going out of his way to link a bunch of blog posts and news articles about it. It seemed like he really wanted me to take a look. Biting my lip, I reluctantly clicked the first link. Like, who is this Grim guy? I'd be laughing. It was like that guy, what was his name? The evil-looking guy, the Nozomi dude. He's like just wanting to keep me aware of what's happening. I doubt it, but I feel like Grim is someone that we know in real life. The DQN puzzle. That's kind of a, as he would say, that's kind of a weak sauce name. On November 4th at approximately 4:50 a.m., the dead bodies of 3 men were discovered hanging from an iron pole near a railroad in Shibuya, Tokyo. The deceased have been identified as 19-year-old Fujita Koei, unemployed, 20-year-old Anzawa Saburo, a college student, and 19-year-old Takagi Ryo, a construction worker. According to the police, the bodies were severed in half the waist, but the wounds do not indicate the use of any sharp weaponry. Furthermore, the bottom halves of each of the bodies were interchanged with one another, forming new combinations which were tightly sewn back together with thread. Carved into each body were the letters D, Q, and N, respectively. The police are investigating the possibility this may be a message left behind by the culprit. On the popular anonymous online message board @channel, images of the incident were leaked prior to official coverage of the events. It had already been accepted as the 7th case of the New Generation Madness, aka NewGen, and it was christened the DQN puzzle due to the manner in which the top and bottom halves of the corpses were recombined. Notably, on @channel, the term DQN means an individual lacking basic common sense. Regarding the serial NewGen cases, the mourning families of the victims have been taking legal action against particularly offensive posts on @channel, a move which has sparked fierce debate online. Oh, and then there's things about the Esper Boy interview with Yuri Brightman, 1,000 calls about Esper Boy flood in overnight. Okay, NewGen. Wait, it says DQN, LMAO. Literally zero connection to the other cases. Police are dumb as fuck. You trying to say it's one of us anti-DQNs? With their lower bodies swapped around and shit, it's like a puzzle but with corpses. If only I could trade in my upper body for some alphas. Our Esper Boy Nishijo will sniff out the perp for us anytime now.
今日午前4時50分ごろ、東京都渋谷区の線路沿いで男性3人の他殺死体が鉄柱に吊り下げられているのを通りかかった新聞販売員の男性が発見しました。警察の調べによりますと、殺されたのはいずれも渋谷区に住む無職藤田康平さん、大学生の安沢三郎さん、とび職の高木亮さんの3人です。3人とも胴体の部分が切断され、それぞれの上半身と下半身が別々に入れ替えられて糸で縫合されていました。3人の額にはそれぞれ謎の傷がつけられており、警察では犯人からのメッセージではないかとみて調べています。渋谷では2ヶ月ほど前から猟奇殺人事件が頻発しており、警察では今回の事件も同一犯による犯行の可能性が高いとみて捜査を続けています。
This is wild that this is just like happening in the course of 2 months. Like, I forget about that. At the end of the news clip, photographs of the 3 victims were shown. I had seen those faces before. Oh. Wait. Oh, that's right. Oh, it's the 3. Oh, shit. It's the 3 guys that beat me up. I didn't even make that connection. I'm so dumb.
知ってるの？
昨日僕に絡んできた。
I'd given them my wallet, but they'd kicked my ass anyway. I'd then fallen unconscious, and when I woke up, Kozue was beside me. The 3 of them had been collapsed on the ground, covered in blood. I dug my wallet out from my pocket and stared at it intently. When I came to, Kozue had been carrying it, and she'd given it back to me soon after. Could the person who'd killed those 3 be? No, definitely not. The last time I'd seen them, they had been beaten to a pulp and covered in blood, but they hadn't been cut in half or anything. Which would mean they'd been killed after Kozue and I had left. It had to have been Shogun. That wrinkly asshole was trying to provoke me. Damn it, he really was committed to driving me insane. Just how far was he willing to go? I wanted to vomit. I clutched my stomach as it churned in pain. Was I next? Would I be next to die?
終了。
A hand reached out from behind me and pushed the power button on the monitor. The screen went pitch black.
落ち着いて。気にすることないよ。ただの偶然だって、きっと。
Why was Rimi acting so ridiculously optimistic? This couldn't possibly just be a series of coincidences.
それより、お腹空いちゃった。ねえ、私が行きつけのお店があるんだけど、そこにご飯食べに行かない？安くて美味しいんだよ。私が保証する。まあ、お客さんはおじさんが多いから、私みたいのが一人で行くのはちょっと恥ずかしいけどね。あ、それと、駅の中に入らなくちゃいけないんだった。渋谷駅のコーナーにあるから。ちなみに、山手線内回りと外回りのホーム、どっちにもあるんだけど、私は断然内回りの方が好き。
Food, huh? I really didn't have much of an appetite right now. It felt like Shogun was holding a knife straight to my throat. Like he was saying, I can kill you whenever I please. Please, just let me go. What had I done to deserve this? I couldn't take it anymore. Oh, okay, there's Ayase, there's her sword. Haven't seen her in a while. Kishimoto Ayase was lying in a hospital bed, idly gazing out the window. No bars lined the outside of it, a fact which set it apart from those at Ark Heart Medical, where Ayase had stayed in the past. All that stood past the window's frame was the landscape of Shinjuku, decorated by skyscrapers and illuminated by sunset. Flocks of pigeons soared freely through the sky, flapping their wings to their heart's content. Every now and then she would gaze upon the sight with a pained expression. Her slightly tired eyes were empty and bleak. Her irises reflected nothing. Her lips, which could let flow a voice so beautiful it shook the youth of Shibuya, were now sealed tight. Not even so much as a hum escaped from them. Following her suicide attempt, an event which caused quite the turmoil, she had been admitted to the psychiatric ward of a large hospital in Yoyogi. Her injuries were already very nearly healed. According to the doctors, it had been nothing short of a miracle that she had been able to survive a fall from that height, let alone with barely even a scratch. However, she had indeed hit her head fairly hard, and as such she had been rushed to the hospital, primarily so they could see how the situation would develop. It had already been over a week since then. However, despite her having been admitted for such a reason, all it seemed to entail were a few rudimentary tests taken every couple of days or so. Beyond that, she had been rather neglected. Her hospital room was private, with no other beds inside it. Ever since her stay had begun, her D-sword had been leaning against the window. It constantly emitted a blue light, yet nobody who visited her ever seemed to notice. Not that there had been many visitors to begin with. Phantasm fans would attempt to force their way into her room daily, but as they always caused a disturbance in the process, the hospital had an excuse to forbid them from visiting her. And since Ayase was somewhat detached from her family, there were almost no others who came to visit her. Not even her bandmates? Oh, there we go. Her fellow band members had made an appearance once, but Ayase used that opportunity to announce her decision from the band to break up. They had not contacted her again since. Hey! And there she is again. I bet she's like keeping an eye on all of the gigalomaniacs. She's like working with Nozomi or something. A nurse wearing white scrubs opened the door to the room and swiftly entered. Ayase slowly turned to look at the nurse's face, then took out the thermometer that had been resting under her arm. It was as if she had only just remembered its presence. The nurse took a look at the recorded temperature shown on its digital screen, then took note of it on the clipboard she'd brought with her.
37度1分と、ちょっと熱っぽいかしら。ズキズキするわ。頭。
Ayase grimaced in pain once again.
あら、また頭痛？でもそれは薬の副作用よ。 気にしなくてもそのうち良くなりますよ。
Having recorded her temperature, the nurse consoled Ayase with a kind smile. Her expression was so gentle, it was clear to all how she was able to put her patients at ease. And yet, despite the nurse's attempts, Ayase simply pushed her hand against her forehead as she shook it back and forth. Ayase had been plagued by mild headaches ever since she had first been hospitalized. They were not especially painful, but they still left her with an uncomfortable feeling that refused to go away, one that felt as if her brain itself was convulsing. It even reached the point where ability to think was impaired. As well as this, her body would feel as heavy as lead. Ayase had experienced such symptoms in the past, namely when she had been institutionalized at Heart Medical. Back then, her head had constantly been split apart by painful headaches, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It deprived her of all sleep and emotional stability. Those were the memories she did not want to resurface. The past she had sealed away, the events of around 2 years ago. And yet her headache was causing them to flash back into her mind once more. Oh, Jesus. Okay, well. In them, a dark room, its single window locked behind bars. Apart from the wall in which that window stood, the rest of the walls were covered with mirrors. Ayase had been placed in the center of the room, sat in a crude steel chair. She was wearing headgear with countless cables protruding from it. Her hands were tied to the back of the chair. Her head was locked in place with her chin tilted slightly upward. Not another soul was present in the room. Thus, all that could be heard were the sounds of Ayase's labored breathing and the metal groans of the chair she sat upon. Saliva trickled down from the corners of her mouth, accompanied by moans akin to those of a beast's. If anyone were to hear them, they would never be able to guess they would be coming from a girl as young as her. She was being tortured, slow, methodical torture, one that made very, very little sound. The method only involved one single thing, not even an action. A drop of water. Oh, it's water torture. Is that called like Chinese water torture or something? A drop of water falling from above onto her forehead every 5 seconds on the exact same spot. That was all it took. And it would continue unrelentingly for 2 full days. The result? Ayase could think only of the drop that would fall next. Her senses were sharpened to their limits. And each time a drop fell on her forehead, another hallucination would be born. So it's like they're torturing hallucinations out of her, and they sense that she's got like powers and they want to bring them out of her. One in which each and every nerve across her body was plucked out one by one. One in which the bones of her entire skeleton crumbled to dust. One in which her head was pierced by a long, sharp awl. One in which all liquids within her body, including her blood, froze to ice. One in which the skin lining her entire body slowly rotted away before eventually peeling off. Assailed without end by these sensations, Ayase could no longer maintain her sanity. Returning to her senses, she breathed erratically as she tightly gripped the sheets lining the bed. Her body trembled as those dark memories of hers resurfaced in her mind. The nurse that had been in her room just a moment ago was already gone. Dinner time had just arrived at the hospital, and the clamorous sounds that came from it resounded from down the hall. Ayase tried to recall the words the nurse had spoken to her right before leaving. Was her headache really just a side effect of the drug she was on? Or had it been caused by her hitting her head, perhaps? Or perhaps it was just a hallucination brought forth by her past memories. She was unable to come to a decisive conclusion. Wiping away the sweat that ran down her forehead, Ayase called forth a smile laced with self-loathing.
構わないわ。今さら何をされたって。あれはあの神罰を耐え抜いたんだから。もう迷わない。私は。
Murmuring in perhaps delirium, Ayase soon became aware of a sound reverberating throughout the hall. The comforting sound of shoes stepping on the linoleum. Why can't I say that word? Linoleum floor. It was certainly not being made by a nurse, and the sound of footsteps was heading right for the room she was in. Someone knocked on her door and she sealed her lips tight.
失礼します。
It's Sawa. Is that his name? The young detective? That someone was but a single man. He had come bringing gifts, namely a large basket filled with all manners of fruits. She could recognize the man, which was far from a good sign. Thus, she stared at him with a dubious gaze.
どうも。あ、別に怪しいもんじゃないっすよ。自分は。
知ってるわ。
Oh yeah, she said she encountered the cops before, right? The man was a detective at the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department. He'd once shadowed Ayase, as she was originally a suspect for the NewGen case. The detective, relieved by her response, scratched his head. His demeanor was unendingly casual.
いやー、嬉しいっす。君みたいな美人に覚えててもらえて。記憶力いいんすね。
The detective moved closer to her bed. Ayase briefly glanced at her D-sword leaning against the window. It lay just outside her reach.
今日はお見舞いに来たんすよ。
そうは思えないわ。目的は
鋭いっすね。
The detective flinched very overtly, his reaction perhaps bordering on theatrical.
まあ、ちょっと綾瀬ちゃんに聞きたいことがあって。あ、これ、よかったら食べてほしいっす。
The detective smiled innocently, presented the basket he'd brought with him, then placed it at Ayase's feet without waiting for approval.
うまいっすよ。あと、高かった。と。
いらない。
まあ、そう言わず、せっかく買ってきたんで。後でお母さんが来た時にでも切ってもらって。あ、しまった。綾瀬ちゃんはもう何年も両親に会
Okay,
って
he knows a lot about her, huh? He probably did research on her, I'm guessing. Despite the detective's insensitive remark, Ayase felt nothing in response to it. Her ties to her parents had been cut from a very young age. Her parents had a reputation to uphold, so a child that often caused problems like Ayase had been inconvenient to them, to say the least. Her only remaining contact with them was the wire transfer she received for her living expenses each month, though it could hardly be called that.
申し訳ないっす。
The detective apologized, bowing down hastily. Ayase had only just gotten over the shock caused by her flashback, so she was in no mood to speak with him. Nonetheless, she urged herself to talk all the same.
聞きたいことって何？アリバイ？
違うっすよ。それは前に散々聞いたし。もう綾瀬ちゃんの容疑は晴れたっす。君は白、真っ白。
目星はついたの？犯人の。
それは教えられないんすよ。捜査上の秘密っす。
匠。
秘密っす。
The detective smirked. He was attempting to laugh the question away. And yet, something unrefined could be seen through the cracks of that smile.
しかし西条くんは不思議な少年っすね。彼を見ていると殺人の容疑者にはとても見えない。もしあれで本当に犯人だったとしたら、まさに人の皮をかぶった悪魔っす。
まだ容疑者なのね、彼。
いや、そういうわけじゃないっすよ。
Oh, really? I'm surprised about that, considering that maybe he doesn't know about what Yua said about how, like, she suspects something about with Nishiji. Oh my god, what can I say? Takumi. Like, that she was suspecting of him. The detective casually denied it with a smile, putting Ayase's persistent questions to rest.
ああ、今の話、誰にも言っちゃダメっすからね。
He could be lying. Like, the police have no, what's the word I'm thinking of? Like, they have no obligation to tell you the truth.
情報漏洩すると上司に怒られるんすよ。まあ当然なんすけど。
I know, I feel like Sue is being, like, intentionally, like, he's acting like, oh, I'm just the bumbling young detective, but I feel like he's intentionally kind of feeding her this information for a reason.
この前も先輩のとばっちりで怒られたばっかで。綾瀬ちゃんも一度会ってると思うんすけど、覚えてるかな。バンさんっていう髪がボサボサで武将髭生やしたおっさんでか。
Ayase did remember him. When she had been questioned, the older detective had been even more talkative than the younger one she was conversing with now. His way of speaking had been a lot more assertive as well.
あの人がすぐこのバカって怒鳴るんすよ。そのくせ自分は本来の操作をせずになんだかわけのわからないことばっか調べてて、挙句の果てに自分まで無理やり付き合わされて、最近胃が痛いんすよね。いやまあ根はいい人っすし、勘が異常に鋭い人で、過去にも難事件をいくつか解決に導いたらしいんすけどね。
その話をするためここに来たのは。
Ayase interrupted the man, and his smile quickly soured.
ああ、いや申し訳ないっす。つい愚痴入っちゃったっすね。今の話は全面的に内緒にしてほしいっす。諏訪守る一生のお願いっすよ。
それで
一つ目はなんであんなことを。
Despite his ambiguous phrasing, Ayase could tell he was referring to her diving off the school rooftop.
もう何度も話したわ、他の刑事さんに。
邪神王グラジオールの復活を阻止するためですか。
死ぬつもりなんてなかった。魂を一つ上のステージに持っていこうとしただけよ。
例の若者の間で話題になった君の歌についても似たようなこと言ってたっすよね。
And that was the second question he had for her. Ayase let out a faint sigh.
ニュージェネのことを歌ったものなんかじゃないわ、あの詩は。グラジオール記目視録詩編のインスピレーションを受けて作った第3章102節よ。
Okay. Let's see what this is about. Okay, fictional. A high fantasy novel based on the Eastern European myth of Gladiol, the wicked-hearted king, with the saga in its entirety being told over the course of 23 volumes. It depicts the battle between the Seven Black Knights and Gladiol. It was written by R.C.O. Ziegler from 1929 to 1951. The series has been translated into several languages, but it never gained widespread appeal due to its rather esoteric writing style. Ziegler's other works related to the Gladiol mythos include the Gladiol Book of Kings and Wicked Hearts, Apostolic Letter, and more. All of these works are collectively referred to as the Gladiol Saga.
世界に邪神王グラジオールが現れようとしている。復活を阻止するにはグラジオールが流した黒い血によって作られた7つの杭が必要。杭は剣へと形を変え、神罰を乗り越えた7人の黒騎士の手に渡る。目には目を、歯には歯を。邪神を背負いし人間だけが邪神王を滅ぼせるのよ。
なんか映画みたいっすね。そういう壮大な設定は好きっす。
Ayase glared at the detective in response to his comments.
設定じゃないわ、現実よ。
じゃあ最後の質問っす。
The detective casually brushed away Ayase's objection, though she was all too used to this form of dismissal by now. Not a single person she had told the story to thus far had believed it.
君や西条くんの他にも水明の生徒について何人か洗ったんすけどね。
The detective mumbled to himself as he folded his arms. This was very obviously another act of theatrics, and Ayase had no intention of commenting on it.
何？
すごくバカバカしい質問なんすけど、刑事が質問するようなことじゃないんすよね、本当は。子供じみてるっていうか。
そう。質問する気がないなら出て行って。頭が痛いの。
ああ、いや実はね、バンさんが妙なこと言い出してるんすよ。君たちは魔法使いなんじゃないかって。
Upon hearing the subject of that remark was plural, Ayase raised her eyebrows in suspicion.
違いますよね。
使えるわ。
As she replied, Ayase's line of sight was directed not toward the man, but toward her hand that lay atop her bed sheets.
綾瀬ちゃんって面白い子っすね。
でも、ニュージェネはグラジオールの騎士とは無関係。
ああ、そうっすか。 まあどうでもいいんすけどね。
The detective, completely disinterested in what Ayase had just said, brushed off her words once again, then began to stretch. The moment he did so, a digital sound suddenly cut through the silence of the room. The detective, surprised by this interruption, reached into the pocket of his suit and took out his cell phone.
まずった。病院って携帯禁止なんですよね。電源オフにしておくの忘れてた。うわ、しかも女からだし。付き合って4年になるラブラブの彼女がいるんすよ。
He turned his phone off with a grin, forcing the caller to hang up. He then turned to Ayase once more.
綾瀬ちゃんは映画見るっすか？スパークウォーズって知らない？それに出てくるダース・スパイダー伯爵のテーマなんす。今のメロディ。
Spark Wars. Ayase had no interest in movies nor anything of the sort. Having long since decided she had no obligation to further entertain the detective's questioning, she returned to gazing silently out the window.
実は自分スパークウォーズオタクなんすよ。あ、興味ないっすか？そりゃ失礼したっす。
I don't know what to make of Suo. I want to believe he is just like a dorky young detective, and he just goes on these tangents. And the whole thing about his girlfriend, I'm like, when he got that call, I just had the feeling like, what if it's the Nozomi guy? What if he's secretly working for the Nozomi group and like he infiltrated the police department to like see what's going on? It's probably other. But whenever there's a character that seems a little bit too nice, a little bit too innocent in these games, I am a little suspicious of them. Like with the nurse, I'm like, what's going on with her?
じゃ、自分はこれで。
With that, the detective concluded the conversation with which he had no partner, then left the hospital room. Ayase did not even turn around to watch him go. With the man gone, all that reflected in her eyes was the twilight sky slowly turning indigo.
このボケナス、ずっと待ってた。待ってたんだからね。あなたのことなんか大嫌い。でも大好き。
I stared in a daze at Seraton as she moved around the monitor. The final episode of Bloodtune had aired deep into last night. The story was gradually getting more and more intense, and the ep had received particularly high praise on @channel. This was the third time I'd seen it, but none of it was really sticking with me. I checked the time and saw it was past 10 p.m. Rimi had left at around 8. While she'd been here, she'd encouraged my depressed self in many ways, and she'd said so many nice things to me. Thanks to her being by my side, I'd felt less lonely today than the entire week prior. That being said, Rimi still wasn't taking the situation all that seriously. It felt almost like she was avoiding talking about NewGen entirely. Maybe she was just done with it. With me. Her friend had been hurt in the earthquake, and it sounded like she already had a lot on her plate with just that. She probably just didn't have any room left to bother with me and my problems. But the issue with that was... Well, yes, I was probably way too paranoid. There was no doubt that this was a genuinely dangerous situation. I could be killed today, even. Shogun had been coming after me all this time. Persistent didn't even begin to cover it. If I could just understand what he was doing or why he was doing it, then I could work out some countermeasures.
そういえば、あのおじさん、別れ際にこんなこと言ってたのら。中でも一番特別なのは、その目、誰の目を産み落とした少年。
Whose eyes are those eyes? You could hear those words all over Shibuya by now. On the nets, it had become synonymous with the culprit. It was a phrase I'd used pretty often for a really long time. It was without a doubt a message from Shogun who knew that. Either way, either that or an intentional way of provoking me. When had I first started using that phrase? It felt like someone had taught it to me. I vaguely remembered the first time I'd used it. It was an essay I'd written back in elementary school. The title was that very same phrase. Whose eyes are those eyes? I'd almost completely forgotten what I'd actually written in it. I wanted to check now. What had I written in that essay? It was probably stored at my parents' place, though I had a feeling they might have thrown the old thing away by now. Then again, when it came to things that were pretty important to me as a kid, I did have a habit of storing them in a big empty candy tin I'd used to call my treasure box. The essay could potentially have been in there. What to do? Should I go to my parents? But I want to know what's going on with Nanami. Is that even Nanami? Is that like a plant? Is that a girl that looks like Nanami? I didn't want to show my face to Nanami. I wouldn't know what to say.
はあ、僕はどうしようもなくヘタレだ。
I sluggishly rose from my seat, then collapsed onto the sofa.
あなた、なんでここにいんの？これは違うんだからね。私は別にさ、立ち食いそばが好物なわけじゃないさ。何ニヤニヤしてんの？このボケナス。もう怒った。うなれ！侍コンデンサー！
Lying face up, I gazed at the ceiling while ignoring Sarah's protesting. That dreary, bare steel ceiling. Unlike my room at my parents' house, there wasn't a single groove in the ceiling that looked like a person's face. Oh, wait, what? Suddenly, in the corner of my vision, I noticed a familiar tin sitting by the eroge packages piled up. Oh, wait, so it's like he thought about the tin and then it just appeared. Sitting by the eroge packages piled up by my loft bed.
あれって。
I hurriedly stood up and climbed the ladder to get a closer look. It was a reddish-brown rectangular tin, about the size of a B5 piece of paper. The word shortbread was written on the lid in white letters. There was no mistaking it. It was my treasure box. I must have brought it from my parents' place, though I definitely didn't remember doing so. Gee, good job, me. Always thinking ahead. I quickly grabbed the tin and opened... Watch, it's not even in there. Inside were a few test answer sheets, essays, scraps of paper torn out from sketchbooks, and so on. It was mostly all paper, but there were still a couple of small objects in there. I took all the pages from the tin at once, then began flipping through them for my target. It didn't take long to find. After all, it was at the very top. The essay paper had faded in color. The handwriting, not even a mother could call it good. Could this essay be hiding some kind of important secret? Something Shogun was particularly exploiting? Something that had to do with why the homeless man had referred to me as the most special? With a gulp, I began to read it, one word at a time, being careful not to overlook anything. Whose eyes are those eyes? Nishijo Takumi, class 4-3. I dream a lot. In my dreams, older me visits me in a time machine. That's the homeless guy. The homeless guy is me. I'm guessing that's what it is. He kind of looked like Takumi a bit. Older me visits me in a time machine. He doesn't look like me at all. His time machine has a lot of buttons. I think if you push one, a shower or some shampoo or something comes out. I asked older me how it works, and he said you could go see dinosaurs or even go back to when cavemen were around. He asked me what I'm bad at in school. I said I'm bad at math. He told me that there was a switch that would make me really good at math. I tried to push it once, but he got mad. He said I had to work hard and get better by myself. That was the only time he got mad at me. After he stopped being mad, he was super nice, so I was happy. He told me about the girl I was going to marry. That's a secret. I asked him about God. He told me God is real. I think he's real too. My mom said God is always watching, and he'll make you go to hell if you do bad things. So I can absolutely never do bad things. I have to be nice to my little sister too. Mom told me God doesn't watch you do bad things, but that it's a scary man instead. The scary man is the whose eyes are those eyes monster. He makes you go to hell if he sees you. Okay, so like his mom told him about that? God's eyes and whose eyes are those eyes are in the sky, the ceiling, the walls. There's a lot of them in my school and they're watching me no matter what. So I think I have to do a lot of good things like studying and other stuff because of that. It's embarrassing though because they watch me even when I do things like go to the toilet or take a bath. Also, ever since I was little, I could close my eyes and dream sometimes even though I wasn't sleeping. It was like the inside of my head was like a video game or a manga. But when I do that, the whose eyes are those eyes monster comes out, so I don't want to do that. I asked my mom, and she told me not to do it. But while I'm writing this essay, I asked older me in my dreams to tell me more about the time machine. But he said I knew everything. He wouldn't tell me more stuff because I'm just a kid. So from now on, I want to do lots of good things, so I can beat whose eyes are those eyes. The end.
なんだかよくわからないな。
It'd be nice if like he could go talk to his mom and be like, "Did you ever tell me about the those eye, whose eyes are those eyes monster, or was that just something I came up with as a kid?" This would have been around the time when I first started feeling God's gaze. Maybe I was going through some sort of phase back then. Either way, trying to understand anything from this extremely cryptic essay was beyond impossible. It felt like it'd be easier to decipher a bunch of hieroglyphics than it would be trying to figure out what the hell I had been talking about. You ever do that? Have you ever like found old stories of when you were a kid and be like, was there something wrong with me? Like, where did I come up with this stuff? As I thought that, I noticed something was scribbled on the back of the page. Come to think of it, hadn't I loved doodling back then? Yeah, like in my social studies textbooks. The pictures of historic figures would always have mustaches or sunglasses drawn on them, and my notebooks would always have flipbook-esque animations drawn in the corners. Back then, I'd started enjoying drawing more and more, to the point where I'd even gotten my parents to buy me a sketchbook. Although, to clarify, it wasn't like my drawings were anything to write home about. Immersing myself in nostalgia, I turned the essay over to check out what I'd scribbled on it. Oh, that's terrifying. Yep, that's a cool thing to draw as a kid. That's something if your parents would find, be like, we got it, we're gonna go take you some. Maybe that's part of the reason why he went to go see a psychologist. It was an incomprehensible drawing, but while it was definitely incomprehensible, there was still something familiar about it. Something that I'd seen recently. I'm just looking. What is it? So there's the IR2. That's the name of the chapter.
IR2.
Whether it was a mathematical formula, had some other kind of meaning, or was just a meaningless string of numbers and letters, I had no idea. But wait, let me see. Oh, I didn't even see that. What? That must have been a long time ago. This formula was the exact same one Shogun had posted out of nowhere back when he'd first come into contact with me in the chat room. I totally forgot about that. Whose eyes are those eyes? And IR2. Two key things that had come from the essay I had written many years ago. Things that even I myself had forgotten. And if Shogun knew them, that would mean that he'd been reading my mind after all. Okay, well, a lot of information to take in there. We've got, very importantly, the NewGen case, the 7th one, I believe, with the guys that were messing around with Takumi. So it does seem like he says that a lot of the people seem to be kind of like in his circle, or at least people he's encountered. There was the doctor, there was these guys, the thing with the girl in the hand right after that whole situation with Nanami. So it seems like in some ways they can be connected, but then there are some other people where it's like they seem like the victims seem to be completely separate from Takumi. And then there was what Ayase said about like this whole thing that she's experiencing has nothing to do with the NewGen case, and they seem to be separate. Maybe it's just like whatever she is talking about with that whole like trying to ascend that whole business. And then there's Rimi. Rimi's back, yay! But then like what we saw from the last episode with where she wants to erase Takumi, maybe she thinks it's best for the world. Maybe he might end up doing harm to the world, so he needs to be erased. She seems to like want to have him not be focusing on the NewGen cases, probably for some other reason other than just like it's stressing him out. There was the guy from the Nozomi group who was talking to someone with the Gero Froggy. That could be Nanami, that could be Yua. And speaking of Yua, now Yua has also returned. There's a whole thing about like that thing at the end with Shogun knowing stuff from when Takumi was young, and he also mentioned about like a guy that he met that was his future self from a time machine. The homeless guy looks a lot like Takumi and knows stuff about Takumi. Is Shogun also like a future version of himself. Once again, so many questions, so little answers, but intriguing nonetheless. So that's going to do it for me, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time for part 16. Until then, bye. Special shoutouts to my top tier patrons: Revealing Storm, Lynn's VA, Kenju Storm, and iCognito.